When you hear the word gentleness, what do you think of? Or who do you think of? When you hear the word gentleness, who do you think of? Do you think of somebody in your family? Do you think of somebody here in the church? Maybe you think of somebody in a novel or someone from a movie. Gentleness, what does it mean? Well, here in this well-loved passage, Jesus reveals his heart in a special way. This is Jesus telling us about himself, and he says that he is gentle, and that he is lowly in heart. So what is gentleness? And why is compassion and gentleness one of our key practices as followers of the way of Jesus, as apprentices of Jesus, as those who abide with him and obey what he says and then become like him, are his image bearers here? What does this mean to be gentle? Well, can I show you something strange here from the text we've just read? Something that I think might take us aback for a moment and have us reassess what it means to be gentle. So let's read the passage right before the text that we just read, because the very first words of the text we just read say, "at that time." Well, what time is it referring to? At what time did Jesus say these words about being gentle and lowly? So let's back up and go to verse 20. Here's what Jesus says. Then he began to denounce the cities where most of his mighty works had been done because they did not repent. And so Jesus said, "Woe to you, Chorazin," which is a city. "Woe to you, Bethsaida," another city. "For if the mighty works done in you had been done in Tyre and Sidon, they would have repented long ago in sackcloth and ashes. But I tell you, it will be more bearable on the day of judgment for Tyre and Sidon than for you. And you, Capernaum, will you be exalted in heaven? You will be brought down to Hades. For if the mighty works done in you had been done in Sodom, it would have remained until this day. But I tell you that it will be more tolerable on the day of judgment for the land of Sodom than for you." Okay, that's a hard passage. That's a hard passage, isn't it? Those are strong words. Those are bold words. The Bible can be so strange and unexpected. Now, these words of Jesus don't seem all that nice, do they? These words, woe and no more tolerating and judgment. This is not the stuff you put on your coffee mug, right? Unless it's one of those ironic coffee mugs that you're giving to someone. Right? Because these words, they're set in a jarring way, disturbingly, before our passage where we hear about rest and Jesus, meek and mild. So how does all this connect? What then does it mean to be gentle and lowly in heart? Well, this is an important question because, again, as apprentices of Jesus, we are those who are to abide with him, to dwell with him, to obey what he says, and then to image him in this world. So how was it that Jesus was gentle? How was it that he was lowly in heart? Because we are to be gentle and lowly in heart. Well, let's focus now in on verses 28 through 30. "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." All right, what is Jesus saying and why is he saying it? Well, first off, notice that this is an open invitation. Jesus has just opened his arms. He is inviting people into his life. And this is a wonderful thing, isn't it? To be invited into a life of goodness, a life of love. This is an incredible thing. Love invites others into its life. That's what love does. It opens its arms and it invites others in. This is what Jesus does. Now, who is invited? The weary, the fatigued, the exhausted, the burdened, those carrying back-breaking weight, the struggling, the stumbling, the people who don't have their stuff together. That means all of us, right? That means all of us are invited in. This is a call to all humanity. And in our sin, we are burdened. Humanity is burdened by our indwelling sin, our failures, our warped expectations, the pressures to perform, to be someone. But Jesus isn't inviting us into some elite clique. This is a call to all humanity. And what does he give? What does this invitation bring to us? Well, rest, peace, a heart put back into socket after a long dislocation. Shalom, all the pieces brought back together. In his mercy, he dispenses grace. Jesus says yes to us. What a thought that Jesus would say yes to us. And this verse shows the compassion of God. He sees the burden. He sees the broken. He sees the suffering. He sees the struggling, and he invites them in to share his heart, to heal, to restore, to bind them up. So do you see the compassion of Jesus just bleeding through this passage? In fact, one of the most often used descriptors of Jesus in the Gospels is compassionate. And the word literally means like a love from the guts, from the intestines, this deep-seated love that comes up and out to care for other people. It's very action-oriented. It's not an abstraction. And so he feels with us, and he feels for us. His heart is drawn to the hurting, to those who are in need. This is why we read in Matthew chapter 9, verses 35 through 36, the following words. Jesus went through all the towns and villages, teaching in their synagogues, preaching the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and sickness. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. Compassion, what is it? What does it mean? St. Augustine said it incredibly well. This is from his book, The City of God. He asks, what is compassion? What is compassion but a kind of fellow feeling in our hearts for another's misery? But then he goes on, which compels us to come to his help by every means in our power. By every means in our power. That is what Jesus does. Now, if we look back at Matthew 11, 28 through 30 here, we see that this peace and this rest that comes through the weary and the burden comes in the form of a yoke, which is a strange image because a yoke is a wooden collar. It's a harness put on oxen to have them pull together. It's an instrument of work, of sweat, of effort, of labor. It's a tool to link up one ox with another so they can pull together, so things can be planted, so there can be flourishing, there can be fruitfulness. But this yoke of Jesus is an easy yoke. And that word easy actually can be translated as kind or good. It's a kind or good yoke. The burden is light. It is a good and loving thing. And interestingly enough, the word yoke was used to talk about a rabbi's teaching. You would take on the rabbi's yoke, which meant you would take on their teaching. You would link up with that rabbi. You would walk at pace with them. You would learn from them, and their ways would become your ways, and you would be working together ultimately. So Jesus says, take up my teachings. Live my way. Now, why? Why are his ways rest-bringing ways? Well, because he is gentle and lowly in heart. He's a good God. He doesn't crush his people. Now, those things said, then what is gentleness? What is gentleness? Well, first, gentleness is not a temperament. It's not a personality type. By the way, no personality test, strength assessment, or leadership test can be an excuse to bow out of gentleness. Well, I'm an Enneagram 8. I'm an ESTJ, I'm Myers-Briggs. I'm a high D on the disc, so that's not me. So I'm out. No, that's not how it works. This is something different than personality type. It's not passivity. It's not simply being nice, cordial, congenial, or mellow. It's not simply avoiding crucial conversations. It's not being a pushover. It's not talking in a soft voice or only using positive reinforcement, although it might include those things. Gentleness. Gentleness. Gentleness is an operation of power. Gentleness is an operation of power. See, when we understand that gentleness has to do with the use of power, we begin to understand how Jesus can say the things he said about woe and judgment and then say, but I am gentle and lowly in heart, because compassionate gentleness is stewarding power with sacrificial love. Stewarding power with sacrificial love. In our verse, Jesus says that they should come to him because he is gentle in heart, not because he speaks in soft, hushed tones, but because he uses power in loving and sacrificial ways. His point is that people are under cruel taskmasters. They're crushed by destructive religious impulses, by tyrannical ideologies, oppressive cultural expectations, systems that abuse power, unjust systems, and supernatural powers that burden and afflict God's image bearers. And Jesus, on the other hand, uses his power compassionately to love others, to heal, to liberate, to redeem, to restore. He has a heart for the weary, the sick, the sinner, the rebel, and the poor. He does not heap upon them guilt or condemnation or shame. He does not coerce, bully, berate, or exasperate. Now, if this is gentleness, if it's not a personality trait, then it is something that we are all called to as followers of this compassionate master. We all have power, all of us. Parents, you have God-granted power. You are bigger and stronger than your kids, at least for a while. You can intimidate with your physical size, your force, and your volume. You have monetary power over them. You have the power of words to bless or to curse them, and it will affect their whole lives. Have you ever been not so gentle with your kids? And in a moment of exasperation, you needed a pressure relief valve, so you yelled and you used power in a non-sacrificial way. Children, you have power. You have power to express love and affection, to respect, or you can withhold all that. Have you ever snubbed your parents, given them the cold shoulder, said something mean just because you wanted something and you had no concern about your parents' view or the burdens they carried or were shouldering? Employers, power is granted to you. Have you intimidated? Use your position to bully, to manipulate? Do you push, prod, and coerce rather than serve and lead? Church leaders, power has been granted to you, to us. Have we intimidated, used position to bully and manipulate? Have you ever lorded over someone with a title, a role, credentials to make somebody do something that you want them to do? Have you ever used scripture like a mugger's knife rather than a surgeon's scalpel? Happens all the time. Church, all of us, have you used the power that God has given you for the good of others in sacrificial ways? You have relational influence. You have your technology, your tools, your reasoning abilities, your finances. Have you used these forms of power compassionately for the love of others? See, many of us have been apprentices to the culture of outrage. We've been apprentices to the culture of fear-mongering, apprentices to the culture of blame shifting, the culture of bullying and browbeating and moral superiority. Friends, there's a lot we could talk about regarding this, but the best way to understand compassionate gentleness is this. Look at the cross of Jesus. Look at the cross of Jesus. Jesus is not concerned about justifying himself and saving his reputation, but his merciful purpose is there to justify humanity and to redeem the lost. The cross of Jesus is the ultimate act of compassionate gentleness. There on the cross, he was mocked. He was told to prove himself. He could have had an army of angels come down, lift him up off the cross, and shown everybody what was really going on. But in his merciful grace, in his power, he restrained power to lift others up. The cross is that great moment of sacrificial love, of power used for the good of other people. Such power to restrain oneself, to endure injury with patience, to operate out of mercy rather than a resentment, to give oneself for the healing of others, and to trust the Father and to not control the outcome, to give oneself entirely. That is the practice of compassionate gentleness. And this is the shimmering beauty of compassionate gentleness. Jesus has been gentle towards us. He's entered into our suffering to bless us, and he's empowered us by his Spirit now to practice compassionate gentleness. So may we steward the power that God has so graciously granted us. May we steward it with a sacrificial love that honors our King. All right, my friends, we have the opportunity today to enter into this practice of compassion and gentleness in a really, really powerful way. And so what I would like to do at this time is I'd like to call up Dr. Nujerling Vargas. So Dr. Vargas, would you join us? Would you help me in welcoming Dr. Vargas? There you go. Yes. All right. Well, as Brian said when we began, Dr. Vargas came all the way from the Dominican Republic, just a few hour flight, a long day for you yesterday, and she is a neurosurgeon. She's a follower of Jesus and a passionate supporter of compassion, and you'll see why here in just a moment. I want to say thank you for being here. Thank you for taking time. When we talked this past week, I realized you had quite a busy schedule. I think you're coming off of a 13-hour surgery right before a Zoom call. So thank you for being here. I'm going to let my words be few. So I want to begin by asking you, would you share an overview of your story with us so the family can get to hear?
First, I want to say thank you for the invitation. It's a honor to be here with you guys today. It's amazing to see the Word of God in our life every day. I want to start saying I'm from the Dominican Republic. I born in the north of the country, but due to the lack of jobs and work for my parents, we moved to the east. The east of the country is a sugarcane field. I don't know if you haven't seen the movies, like black people working very hard in this producing the sugarcane. And I still remember this neighborhood. We don't have like sanitary system. We don't have like clean water for a drink. And the houses were made like with very bad materials. Even when there were raining, most of the raining get in the house, and then the floor were full of wood. It was something very inconvenient. I remember still my mother when she left work, she said, "Hey guys, there's a food in the table, so you have to choose when to eat it, in the morning, in the lunchtime, and dinner," because by that time we were really having a really hard situation in our house, and also my mother, she always wanted to us going to school to study, but by that time, one day I remember she bring a notebook and she break in three pieces and she said, "Okay guys, you need to go to school, but we don't have school supplies for each, so you guys going to share the pencil and the notebook." And for me and my two brothers, she broke the piece of notebook. I was not happy at all with that situation as a kid. I said, "But my friends, they have their notebook completely," and she said, "That's the things we can have for now." And that time was very sad for us. But one day, I remember Christian person, came to our house, and they were start talking about Jesus, how Jesus can change life. But by that time, we were not interested in hear what she have to say. But then they said, we work organization called Compassion. And Compassion provide food to the kids. So by that time, our parents just opened their eyes. And they said they give school supplies for the kids. They provide different classes so they can get a skill for life. They will learn a lot of stuff. And also they said, we're going to help your communities, like bringing clean water and pavement the street, and also we want to skill the fathers to they can learn some skills so they can provide for their families. I think that was one of the best days of my life. My parents were very happy. And I remember the last day we were at the Compassion Center. And that day they provide us food, and all the kids were so happy. And the first time I eat chicken, I was 8 years old. And when I saw that in the plate, I tell to my in Compassion, "That's a real chicken. You have to be kidding me. That was what people say. It's so good." And maybe for many people, this is not something special, but for us, for our community kids, it was something like really amazing. And for so many reasons, Compassion changed our life in the community. We were not starving at school anymore because Compassion provided the meals for us. So we don't have to share notebook because Compassion provide us through the church like a notebook completed for our students. And when you finish the high school, I remember I was like, okay, I finished high school, what next? And Compassion have a special program for a young leader of their communities called LDP program. And they provide a scholarship for outstanding kids. I don't think I was standing, but I did what I can. And when I finish, I tell my professors, like, what I'm going to do now, what's the next? And she said, well, there's a program for Compassion Kids. If you have to apply. They just give like 20 scholarship for hundreds kids from the country. And I said, well, I'm going to try, but I don't think so. I will get the scholarship because there's so many smart people in this classroom. And I started to studying to being a professor. So I don't wanted to be a professor, but that was the cheapest master I can do by that time. So every day I went to do to my classes crying. I was like, well, I don't want to be a professor. I want to be a doctor. I don't want to be a professor. So, but that was the things I can do by that time. And one day, like after 6 months, I applied for a scholarship. I remember a call from Compassion, and they say, "Hey, we are calling you for Compassion, just to letting you know, you have win full school supplies to study medicine." And I was like, "Wow, this is awesome. This is amazing." So that the same day I received that call, I tell to my professors of teaching, like, guys, goodbye. I'm going to do my dream. And they said, oh, you must finish this semester. I said, no, 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 I'm leaving just today. So I finished and I started to do medical school. I graduate on the time I have to supposed to graduate it. And after that, I say I want to do a neurosurgery. And everybody was like, Jolene, being a neurosurgeon is something like your father have to be a neurosurgeon before you, or maybe like somebody from your family, and you have to know like a very nice last name. So your last name is nothing special in this country. And I was like, you're right. So I went to the interview for a neurosurgery residency. And I remember one of the professors said to me, Nujalin, you are so cute by that time. And he said, you should do dermatologist or plastic surgery. You will be very good in those things. And I tell him, like, I'm going to do neurosurgery. But by that time, I couldn't approach the neurosurgery because by that time, also in my country, neurosurgery was not mean to females. So my sponsor from Compassion, I talked to her, and she told me, well, if you cannot do it in Dominican Republic, why don't you go to another country? So I went to Brazil, and I took the test back in Brazil maybe 7 years ago or 8 years ago. And after a very long test, I approved the test. And the next month, I was moving to Brazil to do neurosurgery. So I graduated from neurosurgery. Even I was the only black in the group, and I was the only Latin American country, and I was the only female. So that was a very challenging residency. And after that, thank you very much. After that, my sponsor for Compassion, we always, after I finish my residency or my Compassion program, she always was in touch with me. She asked me, so Nujel, what's next? And I was like, I would like to be a school-based surgeon. That's one of the difficult specialties in neurosurgery. And she asked me, where do you want to go? I said, well, there's a program in Japan that they are very good, but it's very difficult to get into this specialty. And she told me, she always remind myself, like, if you believe in the Lord will give you the desire for your heart. And imagine of that, she's my sponsor she's not my sponsor anymore, but she used to be my sponsor by that time, 15 years. She always was taking care of me in every state of my life. I take the test in Japan to do this test, and from 45 applies, I was the only one who get the scholarship. And what can I say? I was the first female in the program of Japan. If we have 150 neurosurgeons, and I was the first female, and I can tell how amazing God has been with me through Compassion and the local church. Now I finished in Japan 1 year ago, and I'm back to my country. And thanks the Lord, I'm working in the biggest hospital of specialties. I'm the second in a school-based hospital. And we are doing what we can, helping the people, giving by grace the thing we've received by grace. And um, it's really amazing to see those packaged back because I guess one day my name was in some of those packages. Someone taking my name, and today, not because a neurosurgeon, compassion provide us dreams. By that time, we couldn't dream before. And then when we started doing compassions, knowing this person called Jesus that helped us and loved us, it gave us a really, they give you opportunity and dreams. That's the things I can say about compassion. Thank you very much.
Amazing. Would you tell us a little bit about the letter writing and how impactful that was for you?
Yeah, you know, every sponsor every month, every 3 months, send letters to their kids. So I received so many kids from my sponsor, so many letters from my sponsor, and the first time I remember somebody told me "I love you" was in a letter of compassion,
Wow.
because I know my parents love me, of course, because they work very hard. But by that time, they were so busy working that they don't have time to tell us that they love us. And the first verse of Bible that I remember was writing a letter saying, "Delight yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desire of your heart." And I was 7 years old by that time, and now a little bit older than that. I will not tell, but I still remember that Bible verse.
Well, that leads us to Kika. Is that how you pronounce her name? Can you tell us a little bit
Yeah.
about her and who she is?
Well, all the employees of Compassions are people from the church. Most of the people who teach all the kids are Christian people, and I remember Kika was one of the most important things in my life because they teach us how to pray, they teach us how to read the Bible, and even if you want it or not to listen the the Bible things every day in Compassion, you have to pray. You have to read the Bible, and when I
You have to
was,
listen to the
you have
pastor,
to
unfortunately.
listen the pastor. Yeah, like in Compassion on Sundays, you have to go to your local church. If you are from Compassion, you have to go. And I think by that point, we were not interested in what the Bible have to say. But after, that words, grow in your hearts. And by the time it grows and make the difference and big impact in life.
That's awesome. Well, the church as well as Compassion had a huge impact on you. Could you tell us a little bit about the impact that the local church and Compassion had on your family and then also the community at large as well?
I think if we go into my community, like where I grew up, it's so different. Like as I told before, there was no sanitary system, there was no clean water, there's no pavement in street, and Compassion through the local church, they make many charities. Like they provide clean water for the community. They start doing sanitary system where kids can go to do their necessities and their needs. And also they skill the parents, not just the kids. They skill the parents like with any skill, a beauty salon, for example, bakery. Like if you don't need to be a master in something, but if you learn and you can provide for your family, we are winning. That was what Compassion said. So I remember my mom learned to do a bakery. So after that, my mom started doing bread to sell. And that was one of the things she can support our family with this. She learned from Compassions and the church.
Now, since you're back home, you've also been able to see other Compassion kids grow up and go through the whole process and how it's affected them. So can you tell us a little bit about what you've seen there?
Yeah, I really amaze myself when I go to the Compassion programs and see, one day I was sitting in that chair, one day I was part of this amazing program, and today, wherever I am is because, Compassion through the local church, because it's not just Compassion alone. Compassion work with the church, and the church provide like the step by step day because they are sure you receive the things you need to receive so you can grow elderly and healthy and all those stuff. And also, I'm now a sponsor myself. I have like 10 kids being sponsored by me, and we are doing working through compassion. Like if there's any kids that needs surgeries or father needs surgery, so we are also working with that part too.
That's amazing. Well, Dr. Vargas, would you, well, let me ask you this. Do you have anything that you would love to tell this congregation? Because here we are today, hearing about compassion. We've been talking about this for a while. We have these packets. We're gonna hear some more information about how to sponsor, how to help. Is there anything else that you would like to share with us?
Sure, I want to say that every letter, every money you send, every prayer, it means something. It works. There's so many kids lacking of love, lacking of prayer, wondering for opportunities. So every small things you do for compassion, it means something. It's not just like, oh, it's just a letter. No, it's a letter to somebody, to someone that will never maybe hear that they are loved, that somebody cares for them. So, and you are giving a chance to a kid to dream. So if you are working with compassion or you are planning to work with compassion, know that you are giving a kid to a chance to dream and to become what the Lord one day became to be.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Paul is back there. He's from Compassion, and I went up to him right before and said, "Do you have any advice for me as I do this?" And since we're friends, and he's a funny guy back there, he's like, "Don't mess this up because these are real kids." So to your point, I mean, each one of those packets represents a life and represents a story, an image bearer that God loves. And so thank you for coming and being here and opening up your heart and your story to us, and you're an inspiration, and the Lord has worked mightily in your life. So we praise him for what he's done. He's a good God and a good King. And so would you all say thank you to Dr. Vargas with me? Thank you so much for being here. Thank you.